How's it going? I'm trying out a new format of video, something a little more casual. Um, I do plenty of lecturing on campus and in other places. I want to try more like, heart to heart, casual videos about things I'm thinking about and more approachable videos to topics I'm interested in. This is about disinformation. So I've just finished writing a new book about disinformation. Disinformed: The History of Humanity's Search for Truth. It's a history of disinformation and also history of rhetoric. The elevator pitch is basically rhetoric is a kind of potential solution to the disinformation problem that humanity faces, and it always has been. It was that even the origins of the field of rhetoric deal with the central kind of problems of truth and credibility and fake news that we're dealing with today. There's a big argument, though, right? That's the quick elevator pitch, and what I want to do here now is just spell out a couple of points on that. I don't want to tease out the entire argument, but just talk about a few things that are related to disinformation rhetoric and why I think rhetoric is still so important. And it's a kind of lost art, it's a kind of forgotten discipline that belongs in our schools, and everyone should be reading Plato and Aristotle. Again, those are big claims and would require a lot of backing up, but I just want to start that process, right? Start teasing out some of those ideas. And the first thing I want to talk about is like fixing our broken public discourse, the kind of yelling at one another and not getting anywhere. That's really frustrating for everyone, I think, is, this kind of polarized political climate everyone talks about in the US. Part of that is disinformation, right? So you have corporate interests and political parties spending hundreds of millions of dollars on digital advertisements for their political candidates and for their ideological positions. And that's really well documented and kind of terrifying. Look at the Breakstone and others, the Stanford History Education Group. They've done great work on civic reasoning and disinformation, and our inability to decode it. 96 or 97% of high school students in the Stanford History Education Group study didn't detect a conflict of interest in a web page from a fossil fuel company that was writing about global warming. That's a conflict of interest, right? That's if you keep a chicken coop in your backyard and you let a fox watch over it, right? There's a conflict of interest there. You don't get your information about climate change from a fossil fuel company. It's not a good source, right? That's what we teach in like an introductory college composition course. But millions of Americans don't take an introductory composition course, right? You know, an introductory composition is not a very attractive sounding discipline. Academics are really not very good at branding. It's a super important skill, evaluating and assessing the credibility of information and learning how to make great arguments. So fixing public discourse, what can we do? Is we need to base our arguments in good evidence. And you should want to do that personally. There's something wrong with your moral compass if you don't want to know the truth. You have to want to know the truth, like scientifically, intrinsically, personally. We don't want to live in the darkness, right? You have to come to grips with that first. You have to look inside yourself and potentially dismantle some of your like biases and ideologies and things you've been taught. And you have to start from like that first principle of, I want to know what's true. And that's hard, and that hurts, right? Cornel West puts that really well. The unexamined life is not worth living, but the examined life is really difficult, or the examined life is full of suffering. And yeah, that's hard. So you have to first want to know the truth, right? And then you have to look for good evidence to direct you, right? And so that this is, my claim is, how do you fix public discourse, this polarization is you have to be able to sit down and say, I genuinely want to figure out this problem. I'm willing to look at the best, most credible, authoritative evidence on the subject, and then we're going to debate and discuss that evidence and its methodologies and its applicability and the extent to which you can extrapolate it beyond the parameters of the study. And we're going to triangulate and look at multiple studies, and we're going to put those in conversation with another. We want to figure out the truth of a question, right? We want to know how to, right? We want to look at these major existential threats to humanity like climate change and discuss what the best way forward is. And you have to want to know the truth to do that. And so you have to be able to sit down and have a conversation looking at the best possible evidence. So that's an idea from rhetoric, right? Is the Aristotle encapsulated this as ethos or ethos, character and credibility of a speaker. And again, it's something we teach in like an introductory college composition course that not every American has access. Only something like 30 some percent of Americans get a bachelor's degree. Rhetoric isn't really something that's taught in high schools, very passingly. So you have to look at, right, we teach how to assess the credibility of information. And you have to do the same thing in everyday life. If you don't want to be easily duped and easily persuaded, if you don't want to be fooled by political parties and companies and advertisements, if you want to be a free-thinking person, you have to assess the credibility of information, right? You might see hundreds of advertisements every day. Not just for products, for ideas, for values, for politicians running for office, for ideological ways of looking at the world. You're going to be exposed to a lot of messages throughout your life. You have to assess their credibility. And people can be very persuasive. This is the historical origins of the field of rhetoric. Why was Aristotle writing about ethos and credibility in the first place? He was responding to his mentor, Plato. Why was Plato writing about, especially in Phaedrus, I talk a lot about, why was Plato writing about the necessity of truth in rhetoric? Because he was angry at the sophists who would teach ancient Greek citizens how to be great speakers but no sense of ethics. The sophists were teaching people persuasive techniques for delivering speeches, argumentative techniques, a kind of technical approach to using language that was really effective. But Plato claimed that the sophists were not teaching people how to be good philosophers, good thinkers, good ethicists. Plato accused the sophists of teaching people how to make lesser causes seem the greater, how to make false arguments, essentially. And there's a lot of false arguments in today's world, right? I mean, everyone's a sophist. People who have no business making arguments about particular topics are out there, on YouTube especially. People make arguments about topics in which they have no credibility, in which they have no experience, industry experience, professional experience, academic research experience. That's demoralizing, that's difficult, but what you can do is seek out the best information upon a subject if you want to be truly well informed, if you want to make good arguments yourself, if you want to seek the truth, which you should want to do. If you want to find out the truth about a subject, you have to go to the best sources, the most credible people. the newest and most credible research and data, and you have to assess it yourself. And you have to synthesize it with other information. Those are difficult things. Those are time-consuming things, but that's how you formulate an informed and not a disinformed perspective on a subject. Other people will love to think for you. They'll tell you what to think. People are very persuasive. I use this example all the time in my classes, and it's a bit cliche, but it illustrates the point really well. What do you get when you have a really persuasive speaker who has no sense of ethics or has not philosophized well? You get someone like Hitler. Hitler was incredibly persuasive, but had no sense of ethics. Take that example and look at today. There are many companies that disinform. They're very persuasive. They hire really good marketing and advertising and communications professionals to promote their messages, to promote their belief systems and their values, to get you to think differently. Look at the Cambridge Analytica scandal. These are folks who are digital sophists. They're willing to make lesser causes seem the greater. They're willing to lie. They're willing to disinform. They're willing to make arguments that are convenient for their purposes, for profitability, or to promote their candidate, or for conflicts of interest, for their special interests on their own accord, what they want in the world. They're willing to push aside the truth. Well, so that's why rhetoric is fundamentally important. It helps you assess the credibility of the sources you're looking at. It helps orient you toward truth. It helps you decode the messages that are coming into your life all the time. And even in a really practical kind of way, I won't go into great depth in this video, but things like Aristotle's artistic proofs, ethos, pathos, and logos, those are useful tools. But I mean more than that, more practically than that. Even it's just even the attitude of, if you're having a conversation with somebody or you see an advertisement, be willing to ask, what is your evidence for that? What is this based on? Where's this coming from? And then to really follow that through. Don't let someone just send you a link to a random article and say, here's proof of my position or my opinion. Challenge that. Like, okay, where did this journalist get this data from? And then when you follow that through and you actually read, the peer-reviewed study or the data, does it even support that position? Because usually, peer-reviewed science is really careful. It's really well qualified. It's very parameterized. Scientists are very careful, with their studies. And so a lot of this kind of broken public discourse is misinterpreting scientific studies, misinterpreting data, using data for ideological reasons, using opinion pieces as if they were scientific fact. So always be willing to ask for evidence, and ask yourself that too. Do you believe something that is not based in evidence? And then be willing to perhaps change your perspective. If good, credible, top-tier vetted data or scientific studies disagree with your value, or challenge your value system, or challenge your belief on a topic, be willing to explore that for the sake of truth, right? For the sake of understanding this perplexing universe and this perplexing life that these perplexing lives that we live, for the sake of understanding it, for the sake of knowledge. That is my case. And I tend to go on a little bit too long with these things, so I'll stop now. But this is the book I've just written, and which will come out later this year, deals with all of these problems and even provides some, heuristics and guidance about how to decode disinformation, um, and why rhetoric is still important, why we need rhetoric in our lives, and how it can potentially help us on an everyday kind of practical level to deal with disinformation, to have better conversations with one another, to solve problems. Um, I think that we're missing this right now. We're missing the study of rhetoric in our public discourse, in our education. We're missing these kind of key questions about honestly coming to the table, honestly coming into a conversation, into a political debate, into a disagreement, and saying, I'm willing to find the truth. I want to find the truth. Let's look at the data together. Let's analyze the evidence together and come up with a solution. Let's be willing to listen to each other's arguments, and let's make really good arguments ourselves that are based on the best possible data, right? I love Gerard Hauser. Rhetoric is what emerges in indeterminate spaces, right? We need rhetoric to talk to each other to solve problems, because there's no study, there's no scientific peer-reviewed article that says, here's exactly how you should spend $1 trillion federal budget in the United States, right? It's an impossible, like, scientific studies are very well calibrated and careful and parameterized. So, but that's still a really important question that, we debate, and we need to figure out what is the best way to spend $1 trillion, at the federal level or something. Where should those resources be allocated, right? That's where rhetoric comes in. Discussing, debating, disagreeing, but you have to use really good evidence to get the best answers in those indeterminate situations, in those indefinite, indeterminate places. You want people who are earnestly going to seek for the truth, earnestly try to develop the best possible arguments and the best reasoned solutions. So it starts with that first principle of, you have to say, I want to know the truth, and that's painful. And it's okay that it's painful. I want to know the truth about I'm naturally curious. I want to know reality. I want to interface with the universe in the most honest way that I can. I want to know the truth. I'm willing to set aside my biases and my values and my belief systems and my ideology and my political persuasion. I'm willing to set that aside and look at evidence. And I'm going to be careful. I'm going to carefully assess and analyze the evidence. And I'm going to seek out experts and see what the experts say. And then what do the experts disagree on? Where do they not meet? And what are those conflicts? And I'm going to synthesize multiple sources. But they're going to be the best sources I can find on the subject. They're going to be peer-reviewed, or they're going to be from experts in the field, or they're going to be well vetted. It's going to be well vetted information or publicly available data that other people have been able to analyze and look at. I'm going to look for only the best sources. And then I'm going to come to maybe some conclusions based on, all of this information that I've analyzed. And I'm going to come to the table and have that conversation with somebody, and I'm going to listen to them too. I'm going to see what they bring in. What are their sources? Where do they disagree with me, and why? And then can we come up with some solution from all these disparate voices and sources and perspectives and data? And that's like the rhetorical process, right? That's the rhetorical process. So there's, in part, how do you repair public discourse, at least to start moving in the direction of repairing civic discourse in the U.S. is with rhetoric, to have better conversations, and then to be better informed about how to decode and analyze disinformation as it comes at you, to be willing to ask for evidence. You don't just see some headline from, a literal fake news website, something someone's made up with the purpose of disinforming you, with the purpose of making you believe some invented, fabricated evidence about something. You look at that, you analyze it, and you're able to say, that's not credible. That's not a credible source. And so I'm going to look for credible sources. I'm going to seek out the best possible sources upon a subject. Okay. I do need to stop myself because I get excited, and these are big ideas. And well, my book comes out later this year on disinformation and rhetoric, and I'll probably make more videos like this. Tell me if this was interesting to you. Tell me what you think. What have you seen in the world going on related to disinformation, and what are your thoughts? Take care of yourselves. Good luck out there. Look for evidence, right? Look for the best possible evidence, and ask others for evidence too. Ask others for evidence nicely, and don't believe them if the evidence isn't there. They might be trying to falsely persuade you, right? As people have been doing for thousands of years. If there is no evidence, then they might be trying to falsely persuade you. Good luck out there.